The music faded, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. King Kalen's hand remained at my waist, a solid, warm anchor in a sea of staring faces. I could hear my own pulse, a frantic drum against my ribs. The dance was over, but the world had not righted itself. He still held me, his golden eyes searching mine, as if checking to see if I would fracture now that the melody had ended. "Your leg," he said quietly, a statement, not a question. "You are in pain." I wanted to deny it. Pride demanded I stand straight and pretend the fire in my joints was nothing, but his gaze held no room for false bravery, only practical concern. I gave a slight, shameful nod. The climb, the fall, the dance, my body was a chorus of protest. "Come," he said, and it was not a request. His hand shifted from my waist to my elbow, his touch firm, yet impossibly gentle. "You need to rest away from this spectacle." He did not wait for a reply. He simply turned, his broad shoulder parting the crowd as if by command, and guided me forward. My cane, forgotten, was now a lifeline again, its rhythmic tap, 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 a counterpoint to the hushed murmurs that rose in our wake. His 5 wolves fell into formation around us. Nimbus, the pale gray, pressed against my good side. The massive black one, Onyx, led the way. The others flanked us, creating a living, breathing barrier between me and the hundreds of watching eyes. We did not go back into the throng. He led me through a carved archway hidden behind a rich tapestry, into a silent, dimly lit corridor. The noise of the banquet vanished, replaced by the soft shuffle of our feet and the pad of wolf paws on stone. Torches flickered in sconces, casting dancing shadows on walls lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. I felt disoriented, swept along by a current far stronger than myself. "Where are we going?" My voice sounded small in the vast, quiet hall. "Somewhere you can breathe," he replied, his tone neutral. "The air in the hall is thick with more than smoke and perfume. It is thick with ambition and pretense. I find it suffocating after a few centuries. I imagine you found it so after a few minutes." His honesty stunned me. A king admitting to finding his own court suffocating. We turned another corner, arriving at a heavy oak door. He pushed it open without ceremony and gestured for me to enter. It was a sitting room, but unlike any I had ever seen. It was not grand, but deeply comfortable. A large fireplace held a low, crackling fire. Books lined shelves not as display, but for use, their spines worn. 2 large, deep chairs faced the hearth, and a wide, low couch was piled with cushions. The windows were shrouded in velvet, blocking out the night. It felt private, real. "Sit, Ilara, please," he gestured to the largest chair. Gratefully, I sank into it, a soft sigh escaping me as the weight left my leg. Nimbus immediately leapt onto the couch beside my chair and laid his great head on my knee, his cool nose nudging my hand. The gesture was so simple, so comforting, that my eyes pricked with unexpected tears. I buried my fingers in his thick, silken fur. King Kalen did not take the other chair. Instead, he leaned against the mantel, staring into the flames. The firelight played over the sharp planes of his face, making him look both ancient and young. The powerful ruler from the hall was gone, replaced by someone quieter, more weary. Lady Seraphine, her banishment, it was so swift. "Justice delayed is justice abandoned," he said, not looking at me. "Her cruelty was not a secret, it was a pastime. My court has tolerated such pastimes for too long, mistaking malice for sophistication. What she did to you was simply the most public expression of a rot I have been too idle to cut out." He finally turned his head, his eyes catching the firelight. "For that, I apologize. You should not have been made the catalyst for my house cleaning." "You have nothing to apologize for," I said, warmth rushing to my cheeks. "You defended me when no one else would. You danced with me." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "It was not an act of charity, Ilara. It was an acknowledgement. I told you the truth out there. Your courage is of a rare and pure kind. It deserves respect, not ridicule." He pushed off the mantel and walked to a small sideboard, pouring water from a crystal pitcher into 2 glasses. He handed one to me. "Tell me of your gift." I nearly dropped the glass. "My gift?" "Your way of seeing," he said into the chair opposite me, his movements fluid and predatory even in repose. "Before you fell, you were watching the crowd. Your eyes tracked movements before they happened. When Seraphine approached, you did not look surprised. You assessed. When that man stumbled, you saw it a fraction before it occurred, but your body could not obey your mind's warning. Am I wrong?" A chill that had nothing to do with the room swept me. He had been watching me as intently as I had been watching others. "You are not wrong," I admitted, my voice a whisper. "After the fire, when movement became a calculated effort, I learned to watch, to predict. It started as a way to avoid bumping into things, to navigate a world that suddenly had obstacles everywhere. But it grew into a profound skill," he finished. "You read the language of the body, the subtle tensions, the flickers in the eyes, the shift of weight that reveals intent. You see the truth people hide behind their words." "How could you know that?" I asked, astounded. "Because I have a similar gift, though mine comes from a different source. Centuries of watching humans and Lycans alike. I can smell a lie on the air, sense a deceitful heartbeat from across a room. But yours is learned, earned through hardship. That makes it perhaps even more precise." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Such a gift is not for navigating drawing rooms, Ilara. It is a tool, a weapon for truth in a kingdom that runs on lies." The direction of his words was a path leading to a cliff's edge. My heart began to pound again. "What are you saying, Your Majesty?" "I am saying the crown needs you," he stated, his gaze unwavering. "My advisors lie to me to gain favor. My nobles lie to me to hide their crimes. Foreign emissaries lie as a matter of course. I have soldiers and spies and diplomats, but I have no one who can simply see. I am offering you a position, a role as a truth singer in my court." The title was poetic, alien. A truth singer? "One who discerns the true melody beneath the discord," he explained. "You would sit in on councils, listen to petitions, observe interactions. You would tell me who is honest, who is hiding fear, who is cloaking malice in pretty words. You would help me govern justly. You would use the skill forged in your pain to protect others from it." The immensity of it threatened to overwhelm me. Me, Ilara Valerius, the crippled daughter of a merchant, working for the Lycan King? "I am nobody," I breathed, the old refrain rising automatically. "You are somebody who saw 3 children in a burning building and ran toward them," he countered, his voice gaining a low intensity. "You are somebody who climbed 60 stairs tonight in agony just to claim your rightful place. You are somebody who endured public humiliation and did not break. That is not nobody. That is the very essence of somebody the kingdom needs." He stood and walked to the window, pulling the curtain aside to look out at the darkened grounds. "You would live here, in the castle. Rooms would be adapted for you. Your family would be welcome whenever you wish. Your work would be valued, respected, and paid accordingly. You would have a purpose beyond surviving the next painful day." Purpose. The word was a bell ringing in the hollow place inside me. For 3 years, my purpose had been to endure, to not be a burden, to get through. The idea of a purpose that mattered, it was a light so bright it was terrifying. Why me? I asked again, the core of my disbelief laid bare. You could find others, scholars, spies. He turned from the window. Because I have looked for 300 years, Ilara. I have seen cunning and intellect and sharp eyes, but I have never seen this particular alchemy, a fierce heart, a history of selfless sacrifice, and a gift honed in resilience. That combination is unique. It is you. He paused, his gaze softening a degree. And because Nimbus has chosen you, he does not do that lightly. His judgment in matters of character is infallible. As if on cue, the great wolf sighed contentedly under my hand. I looked down at his trusting face, then back at the king, Kalin, who waited with a patience that felt endless. I would need to think, I managed to say, to speak with my family. Of course, he nodded, as if he had expected nothing else. There is no urgency, only opportunity. Rest here as long as you need. I will have your family brought to you when you are ready. He moved toward the door, the wolves stirring, all but Nimbus, who remained steadfast at my side. Your Majesty, I called out as his hands touched the door handle. He glanced back. Thank you, not just for the dance, for seeing me. His golden eyes held mine for a long, silent moment. It was my honor to finally look, he said, and then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving me alone with the fire, a loyal wolf, and a future that had just shattered wide open. For a long time I simply sat, stroking Nimbus's fur, trying to steady my whirling thoughts. The pain in my leg was a dull, persistent throb, a familiar anchor in a sea of unreal possibilities. A truth singer, living in the castle, working for the king? Each concept was too vast to hold. The door opened again, and my family entered, their faces a canvas of worry, awe, and confusion. My mother rushed to my side, kneeling. Ilara, my darling, are you all right? What happened? What did he say? My father stood behind her, his expression unreadable. Leora's eyes were wide as moons, darting from me to the magnificent wolf at my feet. He carried you off, and he banished Lady Seraphine, and you danced. It was like a story. It is a story, I said slowly, finding my voice, and he has offered us a new chapter. I took a deep breath and told them everything, the offer, the title, the chance. The silence that followed was heavier than any in the banquet hall. My father was the first to speak, his merchant's mind grappling with the scale of it. A position at court, for life. It is an unprecedented opportunity for our family, for you. But Ilara, the danger, the politics, the enemies you would make. I made a powerful enemy tonight already, Father, I thought, thinking of Seraphine's venomous glare, and he made it clear he would not tolerate such behavior in his service. But to live here, away from us? My mother's voice trembled. He said you could visit, that you could all, perhaps even move here. There would be a place. I reached for her hand. Mama, for 3 years I have been shrinking my world to fit my leg. He is offering me a world vast enough to get lost in, a reason to push through the pain. Leora clasped her hands together. You must say yes. You'll be a truth singer. It sounds magical. It is not magic, I corrected gently. It is work. Hard, perhaps dangerous work. Seeing the truth is one thing. Deciding what to do with it is another. We talked in hushed, urgent tones as the fire burned low. The practicalities, the fears, the dazzling, terrifying hope of it all. Nimbus remained a quiet, supportive presence throughout, his steady breathing a calming rhythm. Eventually, a discreet servant arrived to guide us back to our carriage. The banquet was still roaring in the distance, but my part in it was over. The journey home was a blur of moonlight and shadow. My family's debate continued, but my own mind was settling like silt in a stirred pond. By the time we reached the familiar front door of our house, a quiet certainty had taken root in my chest. I knew my answer. Sleep did not come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw golden eyes in firelight, felt the solid support of a king's hand, heard the title Truth Singer. I saw the faces in the council chamber he described, masks of politeness hiding rot. Could I really see through them? And if I did I have the strength to bear the consequences? Just before dawn, as the first birds began to sing, I made a decision about the decision. I would not give my answer today. I would test myself. I would go into the city, to the crowded market, and I would use my gift deliberately, as he suggested, not to navigate, but to discern. I would see if this skill I had was a crutch or a blade. The next morning, I told my family I needed time and air. Dressed simply, leaning on my hawk-headed cane, I made my way to the bustling heart of the merchant district. The sounds and smells were familiar, but my mission made everything feel new. I found a seat near a popular tea stall and simply watched. I saw a merchant selling what he claimed was pure silk. His smile was broad, his voice booming, but his fingers plucked nervously at his sleeve when a discerning buyer examined the fabric. Lie, my mind whispered. I saw two men shaking hands on a deal. One man's smile didn't reach his eyes, and his shoulders were tense even as he clapped the other on the back. Hidden resentment. The deal is unfair. Then I saw a young girl, no older than 8, clutching a loaf of bread against her ragged tunic. A burly baker stormed out, his face red with fury. "Thief!" he bellowed, grabbing for her arm. The crowd murmured, turning to watch. The girl flinched, her eyes wide with animal terror. But she didn't run, she held the bread tighter. And I saw it, not the act of a cunning thief, but the desperate, coiled posture of someone starving, someone protecting their only hope of a meal. Her fear was primal, not guilty. "Wait!" The word left my lips before I could stop it. I stood, my cane taking my weight. All eyes turned to me, including the baker's. "She's a thief, miss. This is none of your concern," he grumbled. I moved forward, each step measured, my gaze fixed on the girl. I ignored the baker and knelt before her, a painful, careful motion. I looked into her dirt-smudged face, saw the hollows in her cheeks. "Are you hungry?" I asked softly. She nodded, a single jerky movement, her knuckles white around the bread. I looked up at the baker. "How much for the loaf?" He scowled. "That's not the point. She stole. And I am offering to pay for it," I said, my voice calm but firm. I read his body now. The outrage was real, but beneath it was a flicker of shame, quickly buried. He was a man embarrassed to be chasing a starving child. "How much?" He named a price. I paid it, adding a few extra coins. "For the next loaf as well," I said. Then I turned back to the girl. "What is your name?" "Mira," she whispered. "Do you have a home, Mira?" She shook her head, her eyes downcast. In that moment, my personal experiment vanished. This was not about testing a gift, it was about a child. Using my cane, I pushed myself back to my feet. I looked at the baker, then at the gathered crowd. Is there no one who can give this child a bowl of soup and a safe corner for the night? The crowd shifted, some looking away, others muttering. Then an older woman, a vegetable seller with kind eyes, stepped forward. "Come, child, I have some stew left from my lunch." She held out a hand to Mira, who looked from the woman to me to the bread in her hands. I nodded to her. "It's all right. Go." The girl went, casting one last bewildered look at me over her shoulder. The crowd dispersed, the drama over. I stood there, my leg aching from the awkward kneel, my heart pounding. I had seen the truth, not of a lie, but of a need, and I had acted. It was a small thing, a single child on a single day, but it felt more significant than any embroidery I had ever done, any quiet day of endurance I had ever survived. On the walk home, the certainty within me solidified into a clear path. King Kalen was right. This gift, born from ashes and pain, was not meant to be hidden. It was meant to be a tool for good, for justice, for seeing those whom the world chose to overlook. I could be a truth singer, Alara. I would be. I returned home and announced my decision to my family. There were more tears, more worries, but ultimately a dawning acceptance and even excitement. My father began speaking of the logistics, my mother of what I would need to pack. Leora promised to visit every week. 3 days later, I stood before the castle gates once more, this time in the clear light of day. A single travel bag held my belongings. My father's carriage waited to depart. Nimbus was there, sitting patiently by the entrance as if he had been waiting for me. Seeing him, my last shred of doubt dissolved. A steward greeted me and led me inside, not to the grand halls, but to a sunny wing of the castle. The rooms prepared for me were perfect, not opulent, but spacious and intelligent. Rugs covered the smooth stone floors, railings were fixed along the walls, the bed was of a height that made sitting and rising easier. A writing desk by the window looked out over a private garden. It was a space built for living, not for show. I had just finished unpacking my few things when a knock came at the door. I opened it to find King Kalen himself, dressed not in regalia, but in a simple dark tunic and trousers. He looked less like a king and more like a warrior at rest. "You came," he said, and I heard a faint note of what might have been relief. "I did, Your Majesty." "Kalen," he corrected gently. "In these walls, when we are working, it is Kalen. The Majesty is for the court." He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room. "Are the accommodations suitable?" "More than suitable. They are considerate. Thank you." He nodded. "Good. Your first session is tomorrow morning. The Council of Trade meets. They will be discussing new tariffs and guild regulations. They will all have personal interests disguised as public concern. Your task will be to observe, to listen, to tell me afterwards where you sensed falseness, pressure, or hidden alliances. Can you do that?" The task was immediate and concrete. It cut through my nervousness. "I can." "Do not be afraid to share your impressions, no matter how small. Sometimes the smallest twitch reveals the largest conspiracy." He walked to the window, looking down into the garden. "You will eat in the hall tonight with the court. It will be another test. People will be curious, some hostile, most strategically friendly. Observe them all. Nimbus will accompany you." As if summoned, the pale wolf padded into the room from the connecting antechamber, where he apparently had his own bed. "He is to be my shadow?" I asked, a smile touching my lips. "Your guardian and your credential," Kalen said, a hint of a smile in his own eyes. "No one will dare approach you with malice while a Lycan King's bonded wolf is at your side. It grants you space to watch." He turned to leave, then paused. "Welcome to your new life, truth singer Alara. The work begins now." That first dinner was indeed a lesson. I sat at a lower table, not with the high nobles, but with scholars and minor officials. Nimbus lay at my feet, a silent, powerful deterrent. Conversations happened around me, but few were directed at me. I was a novelty, an anomaly to be discussed, not engaged. It was isolating, but it gave me the perfect vantage point. I saw the curious glances, the veiled sneers from Seraphine's former friends, the calculating stares from those wondering if I was a new path to the king's favor. I saw a young lord with a too hearty laugh, who kept glancing at the high table, his ambition a sour note in his joviality. I saw an older councilman picking at his food, his shoulders slumped with a secret worry. I observed it all, storing the impressions away. The next morning I was led to the council chamber. It was a somber room of dark wood and maps. Kalen sat at the head of a long table, several advisors and ministers around him. A chair had been placed for me slightly behind and to his right, a position to see all the faces at the table. No one introduced me. A few frowned at my presence, others ignored me completely. The meeting began. Dry talk of grain yields, wool imports, and river tolls. It was numbing in its detail, but I watched. I saw Minister Gorvin, a man with a neatly trimmed beard, argue passionately for lower tariffs on southern wine. His words spoke of consumer benefit and good relations with the southern dukedoms, but his foot tapped a rapid, anxious rhythm under the table, and his eyes darted to the merchant lord sitting across from him, a man with extensive vineyards in the south. A private understanding passed between them, personal gain. Later, Lady Anya, the stern head of the Weavers' Guild, argued for stricter quality controls on imported linen. Her points were logical, her demeanor fierce, but when a younger guild representative suggested a compromise, I saw a flash of genuine panic in her eyes before she masked it with anger. She was not just protecting standards, she was afraid of something, perhaps competition, perhaps exposure of some weakness in her own guild. For 2 hours I watched the dance of words and hidden motives. When the meeting adjourned, the officials filed out, casting last curious looks at me. Kalen remained seated until the room was empty save for us and Nimbus. "Well?" he asked, steepling his fingers. My mouth was dry. I took a sip of water from the glass before me. Minister Gorvin's advocacy for southern wine is not for the people. He has an agreement with Merchant Loris. Their glances were too coordinated. He profits personally from the lowered tariff. Kalen's expression did not change. "Go on." Lady Anya is terrified. She argues for controls out of fear, not strength. She is hiding a vulnerability in her own guild. The young man who challenged her, he might know what it is, or he might simply be a threat to her authority, but her reaction was of deep fear, not just anger. I continued, sharing smaller observations. The man who agreed too quickly, likely seeking favor. The woman who stayed silent the entire time, her stillness itself a declaration of silent opposition. When I finished, Kalen was quiet for a long moment. Then he let out a slow breath. "Accurate," he said. "Gorvin's dealings are known to my spies, but you saw the heart of it in a single meeting. Lady Anya's guild is indeed on the brink of insolvency due to mismanagement. She is trying to shut out competition to save herself. You saw the cracks in her armor." He stood and walked around the table to stand before me. "You passed your first test, Alara, not with perfection, but with clear, insightful sight. This is what I need. This is what the kingdom needs." From that day, I fell into a rhythm. My life became a cycle of observation and reporting. Council meetings, public petitions, private audiences with ambassadors. I sat in my discreet chair, Nimbus by my side, and I watched. I learned to distill my impressions into concise reports for Kalen. He began to act on them, launching quiet investigations, shifting negotiations, offering unexpected support to those I identified as secretly honest. I was not always right. Sometimes a nervous tick was just a nervous tick. Sometimes fear was just fear, not guilt. I learned to differentiate, to look for clusters of signals, not single clues. Kalen was a patient teacher, discussing my observations, helping me refine my craft. Weeks turned into months. My family visited often. My father, to my surprise, was offered a role as a liaison to the merchant guilds, his expertise valued. Leora thrived in the castle library, devouring books on history. My mother still worried, but she saw the color in my cheeks, the light in my eyes that had been absent for years. And Kalen, our relationship deepened in the quiet spaces between work. conversations in his study after hours, walks in the private garden, slow walks, paced for my leg, with Nimbus and sometimes Onyx trailing us. We talked of everything and nothing. He told me stories of kingdoms that had risen and fallen, of forests that were ancient when he was young. I told him of my childhood dreams, of the simple joy of running, of the complicated love for a family that had both sheltered and smothered me. I found myself looking forward to those moments more than any other. I found myself studying the lines of his face when he was lost in thought, the rare, true smile that transformed his solemnity, the careful way he always ensured a chair was nearby for me. The respect he showed me as a truth singer began to be woven with something warmer, something that made my heart beat in a different, softer rhythm. One evening, nearly half a year after I had arrived, we were in his study. The fire was high, pushing back the autumn chill. I had just finished recounting my observations from a tense meeting with a delegation from the Eastern Reach. I had sensed duplicity in their offers of alliance. They want a military pact, not for mutual defense, but because they plan to provoke a conflict with the northern clans and want our might as a shield. Their lead envoy, Lord Valerius, keeps touching the hilt of his ceremonial dagger when he speaks of peace. It's a gesture of anticipated conflict. Kalen leaned back in his chair, a look of weary admiration on his face. You see what takes my spies months to uncover. You are a treasure, Ilara, more valuable than you know. The way he said my name, the warmth in his usually guarded eyes sent a flush through me. I looked down at my hands, suddenly nervous. I am just using the eyes I have. You are using the heart you have, he corrected softly. He rose and came to sit on the edge of his desk, closer to me. The firelight danced in his golden irises. These months, they have changed things. What things? I asked, my breath catching. Me, he said simply. For 3 centuries, this castle has been a beautiful cage. My duty was a weight, my immortality a sentence. I saw the same patterns of greed and ambition repeat themselves in endless, tedious cycles. I governed out of responsibility, not hope. He paused, his gaze intense. You have brought hope back into these stone walls, Alara. You have made me remember what it is to look at the world and see not just what is, but what could be. You see the truth in people, and in doing so, you remind me of the truth in myself, that I did not become king just to endure, but to build. He stood and took the 2 steps to my chair, then did something that stopped my heart. He knelt before me, just as he had on the banquet floor, but this time there was no crowd, no performance, only the fire, the wolves sleeping in the corner, and the profound silence of the room. My feelings for you have moved far beyond respect for a truth singer, he said, his voice low and rich with emotion. I have come to admire you, to rely on you, to care for you, deeply. I know I am ancient, set in my ways, burdened by a crown. I know you are young, with a life before you, but I am asking, with all that I am, if you would allow me to be a part of that life, not as your king, but as a man who loves you. Tears welled in my eyes, blurring his noble, earnest face. The words were a shock, yet somehow they felt like a truth I had known in my own soul for weeks, but had been afraid to name. The connection between us, the shared purpose, the quiet understanding, it had all been quietly building toward this precipice. Kalen, I whispered, my voice thick, I am a merchant's daughter with a cane. The court will never accept it. The court, he said, a hint of his old steel returning, will accept what I command, and I command nothing here. I only ask. My question is not about courts or kingdoms. It is about you and me in this room. Could you ever see me as I have come to see you? I looked at him, this ancient, powerful, lonely king who saw my scars and called them marks of courage, who valued my quiet gift above swords or gold, who knelt before me not out of pity but out of love. I thought of the hollow years of survival and the vibrant, painful, purposeful months since I had met him. I placed my hand over his where it rested on the arm of my chair. "I do not need to see you that way, Kaylin," I said, the truth flowing from me as easily as breath. "I already do." The smile that broke across his face was like the sun rising after the longest night. He lifted my hand and pressed his lips to my knuckles, a kiss of reverence and promise. Nimbus, from his spot by the fire, let out a soft woof, and Onyx thumped his tail heavily on the floor. In that moment, with the man I loved kneeling before me and his wolves offering their tacit approval, I knew my story was no longer about a crippled girl mocked at a banquet. It was about a queen who had been found in the ashes and the king who had taught her how to rise. The warmth of his lips on my knuckles lingered long after he pulled away. The world had narrowed to the space between us, the fire's crackle, the quiet breath of the wolves, the impossible truth glowing in Kaylin's eyes. He loved me, and I, Ilara Valerius, loved him back. It was a fact as solid and surprising as the stone walls around us. He did not rise immediately. He stayed kneeling, my hand still clasped in his, as if anchoring himself to this new, fragile reality. "I have waited centuries to feel this," he said, his voice a low rumble of awe, "to find a harbor after so long adrift. I will not rush you. The world beyond this door does not need to know until you are ready." His consideration was a balm to my racing thoughts. The practical fears, the court, the scandal, the sheer improbability of it all had begun to swarm, but he held them at bay with his patience. "They will see," I said softly. "They are already watching me like a curious specimen. They will see the change in you." A faint, wry smile touched his lips. "Let them see. Let them see their king is no longer a statue of duty, but a man with a heart that beats again. They may not understand it, but they will have to respect it." Finally he stood, but he did not return to his desk. He pulled a smaller chair closer to mine and sat, our knees almost touching. "We will do this as we do everything else, Ilara, side by side, at your pace." And so we began. The next morning I entered the council chamber as usual. My chair was in its place. Nimbus took his spot at my feet. The ministers filed in, their greetings to the king as formal as ever. But when Kaylin took his seat, he did not immediately call the meeting to order. Instead, he looked at me, a direct, open glance that held a softness no one in this room had ever seen. "Truth singer Ilara, your report on the Eastern Reach delegation was pivotal. Your insight has saved this kingdom from a costly and dishonest alliance. The crown is in your debt." It was more than a professional acknowledgement. It was a declaration, a public anointing. The ministers shifted, their eyes darting between us, recalibrating. I inclined my head, my cheeks warm. "I only serve the truth, Your Majesty." "You serve it well," he replied, holding my gaze a moment longer than necessary before turning to the agenda. That was all it took, a single look, a moment of prolonged recognition. The court was a living organism, sensitive to the slightest shift in power and favor. By that afternoon, the whispers had a new, frantic quality. They were no longer about the crippled girl with the strange gift. They were about the king and his truth singer. Lady Anya, the Weaver Guild head, was the first to test the waters. She approached me after a petition session, her earlier fear now masked by a strained, eager politeness. "Truth singer, your clarity is a gift to us all. I wondered if you might take tea later this week to discuss the guild's affairs from a fresh perspective." Her invitation was a blatant attempt to curry favor through the new perceived channel to the king. I saw the calculation in her eyes, the desperate hope. I declined gently, citing my workload, but the floodgates had opened. Some were hostile, A faction of older nobles, friends of the banished Seraphim, viewed me with cold, silent contempt. They saw not a queen in waiting, but a usurper of their daughter's chances, a stain on royal lineage. I felt their scorn like a cold draught in every hall they occupied. But Kaelin's strategy of unwavering, quiet support was a shield. Where they were cold, he was warm. Where they ignored me, he sought my counsel publicly. He began escorting me from meetings, his hand a steady presence at the small of my back, a gesture both proprietary and protective. The best moments were the ones unseen by the court, evenings in the garden where he would walk slowly to match my pace, telling me stories of the constellations with names lost to human memory. Quiet dinners in his private chambers, where we discussed everything from tax reform to the best way to train a fledgling hawk. He began to teach me the history not written in books, the secret alliances, the buried shames, the true character of every major family in the kingdom. It was an education in power, and he trusted me completely with it. One such evening, about a month after his confession, a new tension entered his frame. We were reviewing a proposed trade map when he set his quill down with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of years.
"There is a thing I must do," he said, not looking at me. "A formality for the court, but a necessity, to silence the worst of the whispers and to honor you in the way you deserve." I waited, my heart giving a nervous flutter. "I must declare a formal courtship," he said, finally meeting my eyes. "It is a royal proclamation. It announces my serious intent to marry, should you accept. It will grant you specific protections, titles, and it will make you a target. It will make this real in a way that rumors do not. Are you prepared for that?" The word target sent a chill through me, but the word honor warmed it away. "I have been a target since I ran into that fire, Kaelin, since I picked up my cane and decided to live in a world that finds me inconvenient. I am not afraid of their arrows, not if you are beside me." His expression softened into one of such profound pride it stole my breath. "Then we will do it at the next full moon court, a week from now." The week passed in a blur of preparation. Dressmakers descended upon me, not for a simple gown, but for a court presentation dress. My mother and Leora arrived, flustered and tearful with joy. My father stood tall, a new dignity in his bearing, as other merchants now sought his favor. The atmosphere in the castle was electric, a mix of celebration and brewing storm. The night of the full moon court arrived. The great hall was once again filled, but this time I did not enter from the edges. I waited in an antechamber with my family, dressed in a gown of moonlight silver and ice blue. The embroidery was no longer of phoenixes, but of intertwined hawks and wolves in silver and platinum thread. My hawk-headed cane had been inlaid with a band of sapphires, the king's color. Kaelin came for me himself. He was resplendent in black and silver, the royal crest emblazoned over his heart. But his eyes were only for me. He offered his arm, not his hand, an arm for support, for partnership. "Ready, my heart?" he murmured. "With you," I whispered back, "always." The great doors opened. The herald's voice boomed, not announcing House Valerius, but a new title. His Royal Majesty, King Kaelin, sovereign of the Lycan realm, and the Lady Ilara of House Valerius, royal truth-singer and honored guest of the crown. We entered together. The silence was absolute, heavier than the night I had fallen. Hundreds of eyes tracked our slow, deliberate walk down the central aisle. I kept my chin high, my grip on his arm firm, my cane a steady, proud beat on the stone. Nimbus and Onyx walked ahead of us, clearing a path, their presence a silent proclamation of power and protection. We reached the dais. Kaelin did not ascend to his throne. He turned to face the assembly, keeping me at his side. His voice, when he spoke, did not need to roar. Its quiet authority hushed the very air. "For many years," he began, "this crown has been a weight, a duty performed in solitude. I believed that was my eternal lot, but the gods, or fate, or perhaps simply a courageous heart, saw fit to change that." He looked down at me, and the love in his gaze was so open, so unguarded, it felt like a physical warmth in the cold hall. "Lady Ilara Valerius came to this court bearing the scars of heroism and a gift forged in resilience. She has served this kingdom with a loyalty and clarity that has purged corruption and guided us towards justice. She has reminded me that strength is not in the broken body, but in the unbreakable spirit." He paused, letting his words settle over the stunned nobility. "It is with the greatest honor and the deepest hope that I announce my formal courtship of Lady Ilara Valerius. It is my intention, with her consent, to make her my queen, my partner, and the heart of this realm. Let this court and all the kingdom bear witness." He turned fully to me then, taking both my hands in his, ignoring the gasps and murmurs that rippled through the crowd. "Ilara," he said for me, though the room heard, "will you grant me the honor of your courtship? Will you walk this path with me, towards a future we build together?" The tears that filled my eyes were not of pain or pity, but of a joy so vast it had no name. In that moment I did not see the nobles, the skeptics, the enemies. I saw only him, the king who knelt, the man who saw me, my harbor, my partner, my love. My voice, when it came, was clear and strong, carrying to the farthest corner of the silent hall. "Yes, Kaelin, I will." A sound erupted then, not unanimous cheers, but a wave of reaction. Some applauded, led by the merchants and younger nobles. Others stood in stiff, silent disapproval. But it did not matter. Kaelin smiled, that sunrise smile, and raised our joined hands. The gesture was of unity, of victory. The rest of the evening was a surreal pageant. I was no longer on the periphery, I was at the center, receiving stiff congratulations and calculating well wishes. I used my gift constantly, sorting the genuine from the false. Lord Gorvin, the wine tariff minister, offered oily congratulations, his body screaming of future schemes to exploit my new position. I stored that away. A young, energetic captain of the guard bowed deeply, his respect plain and unfeigned. I noted that, too. Through it all, Kaelin was my constant, his hand on my back, his low voice in my ear pointing out who was who, his body a bulwark against the overwhelming tide. When I grew fatigued, he noticed instantly. "Enough," he said, not to me, but to the court. "The Lady Ilara has endured enough ceremony for one night." And just like that, he led me away, back through the archway, back to the quiet of the private corridors. When the door to my sitting room closed behind us, I leaned heavily on my cane, the adrenaline draining away to leave sheer exhaustion. "You were magnificent," he said, his hands coming to rest on my shoulders. "You stood before the wolves of the court and did not flinch." "I had a bigger wolf at my side," I said, a weary laugh escaping me. He guided me to the couch, and I sat, letting my head fall back. "It is done," I breathed. "No," he said, sitting beside me. "It is just beginning. The true work starts now. The opposition will consolidate. Seraphine's family will likely make a move. There will be petitions against the match, appeals to ancient laws." He spoke not to frighten me, but to prepare me, as his partner. "Then we will face them, with truth. It is the one weapon they cannot counterfeit."
He cupped my face, his thumb stroking my cheek. "My brave queen," he whispered, and kissed me. It was not the chaste kiss of the garden, but a promise, a seal upon the proclamation we had just made to the world. It spoke of a future, of a shared reign, of a love that would have to be as strong as the fortress around us. In the days that followed, the predicted storms began to gather. A formal protest arrived from House Vor, Seraphine's family, decrying the debasement of the royal bloodline. A faction of traditionalist nobles demanded a conclave of houses to vote on the match, citing obscure succession laws. Anonymous, vicious pamphlets began to circulate in the city, depicting me as a cunning sorceress who had beguiled the king. Kaelin met each challenge with icy, bureaucratic efficiency. The protest was filed away and ignored. The demand for a conclave was denied on grounds of royal prerogative. The pamphlets were traced to a printing house owned by a Vor ally, which was then heavily fined for seditious libel. But the most dangerous attack was not public. It was a whisper, a poison meant for my specific weakness. It reached my ears via Leora, who heard it from a maid. The rumor said my gift was not a skill, but a dark art, that I didn't read bodies, I read minds, that I was a witch who had ensnared the king's will, and that my disability was a mark of a demonic pact, a price paid for my power. It was clever. It took what made me valuable and twisted it into something monstrous. It preyed on superstition and fear. I felt the change in the castle staff first, the extra beat of hesitation before a servant entered my room, the averted gazes in the hall. This Kaelin could not fight with edicts. This poison had to be drained by sunlight. He devised the plan himself. At the next public audience day, where commoners could bring petitions before the king, he altered the format. He sat upon his throne, and he placed a chair for me at the base of the dais, facing the petitioners. Nimbus sat beside me, Onyx beside him. "The truth singer will hear you first," Kaelin announced to the confused crowd. "She will discern the honesty of your plea. Only those who pass her judgment will have their case heard by the crown." It was a monumental risk. If I failed, if I misjudged, it would confirm the rumors of capricious witchcraft. My hands were cold, but I nodded. This was my battlefield. The first petitioner was a farmer, his clothes worn, his hands calloused. He claimed his landlord was unlawfully seizing a portion of his harvest beyond their contract. He was nervous, stumbling over his words. I watched him. His fear was the fear of injustice, not deceit. His eyes were clear, his gestures open, pleading. "He speaks the truth," I said, my voice carrying in the quiet hall. "His fear is of loss, not of exposure." Kaelin heard his case and ruled in the farmer's favor on the spot. The man wept with gratitude, bowing to me as he left. The next was a merchant accusing his partner of embezzlement. The accused partner was smooth, his story plausible, but as he spoke, his left eye developed a tiny repetitive twitch when he mentioned the account ledgers. His feet were pointed toward the door. "This one conceals," I said quietly to Kaelin. "His body wishes to flee his own words." An inspection of the ledgers, ordered immediately, revealed the fraud. One by one, I listened. I saw the genuine grief of a widow cheated out of her pension. I saw the hidden guilt of a man falsely accusing a rival out of spite. I was not infallible, but I was accurate, and with each correct judgment, the mood in the hall shifted. The suspicion began to be replaced by awe. They saw not a witch, but a woman with a keen, almost holy sense of justice, a living sieve for truth. By the end of the long day, word had spread through the city. The truth singer was real, and she was fair. The rumor of witchcraft began to curdle and dissipate under the straightforward reality of my gift in action, witnessed by hundreds of common folk, whose opinion mattered far more than the whispers of jealous nobles. That night, exhausted but triumphant, I sat with Kaelin in the garden. The moon was a silver coin overhead. "You turned their poison into your proof," he said, admiration thick in his voice. You did not just defend yourself, you claimed your authority directly from the people. That is how a true queen rules. Queen. The word no longer felt like a distant title, but an impending reality, a responsibility I was slowly growing into. I looked at him, at the king who had not just given me love, but had fought to create a space where I could wield my own power beside him. There is still so far to go, I murmured, thinking of the hostile nobles, the Vor family's hatred, the endless intricacies of rule. He took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. "We have time," he said. "We have the only thing that truly matters. We have each other's truth. And with that, Ilara, we can build a kingdom that will outshine the stars." As Nimbus rested his head on my lap and the scent of night-blooming flowers filled the air, I knew he was right. My story was no longer about a fall or a rescue or even a dance. It was about a partnership forged in sight and truth. It was about a love that was becoming the foundation of a new legend, and our legend, I knew with every fiber of my being, was only just beginning. If you liked the story, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, and comment for part 2.